I just finished Creed 2. Why did I watch Creed 2?
Maybe I'm old and out of touch and just can't, fathom the modern world. I don't understand the concept of fan service. Apparently, it's a pejorative that's used to describe any sort of film or television show or even book or comic book. Anything along the lines of a franchise that actually gives people what they want and meets their expectations or desires is apparently somehow negative. I don't know. I know in some circles that any sort of art in any art form that makes money is considered selling out. So I'm not sure if it's just part of that weird phenomenon or not. If you create a story in a movie, a TV show, a book, a comic book, whatever, if you have created something that is so good or enough people love and care about that they want more of it, you begin to produce sequels and follow ups. Why would you not, by definition, give them more of what it is they're looking for? If I'm consistently buying a product, I want to expect that the product, well, has the same thing inside the packaging. And of course, you're going to make changes over time, and you may want to draw in more people. Of course, you want to draw in new generations of people as time goes on. But completely trashing and subverting old characters, destroying them to fit the modern narrative, none of that makes any sort of artistic or fiscal sense whatsoever. I don't get why you wouldn't just create new characters and new shows and new things that then fit your new paradigm than the necessity of destroying history. But of course, maybe that's the point, to deconstruct and destroy all of the heroes of the past, to weaken the cultural phenomenons that already exist, to open the door to things that are just as trite, flimsy, and lack depth, completely shallow and vacuous, like all of the things they've turned Star Trek and Star Wars and other franchises into. I was thinking of it a bit today because The Critical Drinker, who is one of my favorite channels on YouTube, I don't mind plugging people that I follow and enjoy. Overlord DVD and The Critical Drinker are the two that I like the best as far as for critique and discussion. Toy Galaxy is a fabulous channel, but that's basically documentaries that are informative. For opinion and commentary, I find I like Overlord DVD. And most of the time, I agree with The Critical Drinker, though sometimes I disagree. I really liked Midsummer. He did not. And I really liked the first Creed movie. So The Critical Drinker did a couple of episodes, one a while back on why modern movies stink. It was very insightful. He followed it up. I just caught a follow up today, more on why modern movies stink. And despite salty language that I don't use on my channel, I love his stuff. But I was then convinced that it was time for me to go ahead and watch Creed 2. It had been on my playlist. I liked Creed 1, and I finally got around to watching Creed 2. Wow. You talk about a movie that clearly did not want to do fan service. They did not want to give you what you wanted. And I was really stunned. Creed 2 stunk. Creed 2 is a terrible, empty, meaningless, vacuous movie, completely pathetic. A lot of people didn't like the way Rocky was portrayed in the first Creed. There's sort of a movement or a thought out there that it was part of deconstructing our heroes and destroying them, the way that Sarah Connor was destroyed, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. But I didn't feel that about the first Creed. I felt that Rocky was the man who always fought to the very end. He always fought for the fight. He was always in the competition. It consumed him, that whole struggle that was always internal and external. And now the very old Rocky, having put everything on the back burner for the struggle and therefore losing everything that was on the back burners, is now at a point where the fight can't happen anymore. He's too old, he's too sick, He lost all these other things that meant something in his life, and he's not able to do what does mean something to him. And I felt like that old, worn out Rocky was quite a believable story arc. Han Solo, who suddenly abandons his family and all of the character development he did over many years within the first 3 Star Wars movies, that was just pathetic. Luke Skywalker, who had this incredible story arc of maturing and developing, becomes a spineless punk that runs off to rot away on a planet. All of this was clearly, those things are attacks on old characters and heroes just to destroy them, to undermine them, and build their new narrative. What they did with Sarah Connor, don't get me started on that. But I felt like Rocky Balboa, that it was a natural part of where he was going to end up, given the whole story. And I really thought they did a good job with a franchise that's really hard to revisit. I mean, Rocky is a very formulaic and simple thing. You know there's going to be a defeat. There's going to be avenging a defeat. There's going to be this sports competition. I mean, you know it's Rocky. It's part of the story. It's unavoidable. And yet, what a good job they did, I thought, with Creed 1. Clearly, based on what we got on the other Rocky movies leading into Creed, it wasn't going to be Rocky's son. He wasn't going to do anything as obvious as train his son to take his place. Bringing in Adonis Creed, this other major character who had died this heroic death against this communist in the ring, bringing in Adonis Creed, bringing Rocky then into the story, getting back Felicia Rashad to be Creed's widow. I really thought it did a fabulous job. And again, for a movie that's trapped with a formula, and therefore it followed the formula, yet it pulled in, and I guess a critic would say fan service, it pulled in all the appropriate elements from the past, paying tribute to them and honor to them, and clearly with the intention of Rocky can't be the hero anymore, moving on. And even though you've taken it from the Italian stallion Rocky Balboa to an African American, you didn't do this in this sudden and abrupt, obvious way. You did it within canon. You did it within the franchise. You did it in a complete way that the long-lost son of Apollo Creed is going to be an obvious person to step up and take the place and to be the hero that you want to follow, given all the history. So a lot of people that didn't like Creed and trash Creed, I disagreed with them vehemently. I liked Creed. And then I made the mistake of watching Creed 2. Creed 2 felt like it was entirely a love letter to modern critical theory. Creed 2 felt like it was a letter of apology to be posted on Twitter in some sort of communist struggle session, apologizing completely for the first Creed, by now making very clear that Rocky is sort of a broken and shallow man, that Rocky's unreliable, that Rocky wouldn't be there for Creed when he has to go up against the Russian, that Rocky is not there when he needs him, and wow. And when you make a sequel like this, and you have Ivan Drago, when you get Dolph Lundgren to appear and you revisit that Rocky IV story that was so huge in the 80s and so huge in that franchise, and you've got Dolph Lundgren and you've got Sylvester Stallone, and you still make a movie this bad, there is absolutely no excuse. I think I heard someone use the phrase recently, malpractice. It's actual cinematic franchise malpractice. To put those two guys in a movie together, and other than the brief discussion they have over a table, none of it feels right. All of the details are sort of taken lightly, with Drago being restored sort of to fame and acceptance in Russia because of his son's good showing against Creed. The son, Victor, gets a pair of trunks that now have the more modern Russian colors. But when they go to the stadium and they reenact the big fight scene, just like from Rocky IV, everything suddenly turns red and you get this creepy feeling of communist Soviet Union stuff. it was a weird way to do an homage to that in a way that made it like, it felt like they were saying it as opposed to fan service, actually fan criticism. It felt like the creators, producers, writers, set people, they were saying to their fans, you're so stupid, you don't know that things changed over there in the last 40 years, so we're going to pretend that it's still communist. Which is more or less kind of how they portrayed Eastern Europe in its entirety. But be that as it may. They also, when Victor first fought Creed, what a terribly missed opportunity. One of the most famous parts of Rocky IV is Apollo Creed's entrance to the ring with James Brown singing and all the patriotic dancers and the flags, the images, the things that said, you know, America, liberty, freedom, anti-communism. You guys pack up your crap and go back to Moscow. And despite Apollo being killed, or because he is perhaps in that sort of setting, everything sort of wrapped up in Rocky IV into that patriotic fervor. Yes, it was the Cold War, but it was part of the event. And if you're going to do a movie like this, and now Adonis Creed comes to the ring, and there's none of that. He does wear the red, white, and blue trunks that he got in the first Creed movie, and it is sort of an honor tribute to his father. And so it's sort of disjointedly patriotic because his dad wore them, he wears them, and yet they didn't do any of that sort of over-the-top, in-your-face stuff that Apollo did to the Russians. Now, clearly, you're not going to get out the old recording of James Brown, or maybe you are. Maybe you're not going to reenact that exact scene, but what I was waiting for, what would have been really cool, we got the sort of standard light show hip-hop entrance of Adonis Creed in the first movie. He comes out sort of that way to face the Russian, and I'm waiting for it. Again, fan service. I'm waiting for it. My expectation is at some point they're going to switch the music, or the monitors will all turn on a recording of that Apollo Creed entrance, something that will be in your face to Ivan Drago and his son. What an opportunity. And they don't do it. And then even in Russia, where they sort of do the pretend communist, everything happens to be red entry, and you're expecting that then maybe, and instead you get a completely weird hip-hop entry that seemed like Jussie Smollett from Empire did it on the streets of Chicago. Why did I say that? Be that as it may, it was just weird. It was weird. It was missed opportunities where things could have been inserted in there that would have made it have the feel of the first one, that there was continuity, connection, organic, not artificial, complete connection. That was what made that movie Creed so good. And everything about this one, it never felt like it was as significant. It never felt like you were as invested. It just felt like they were overwhelmingly dismissing Rocky, minimizing the past, maximizing the idea of this new guy going forward on his own. And even though there's a vague sense that history's come full circle when he wins, it just doesn't carry the weight in the delivery, the acting, the story arc. It was really, really sad because I had high hopes for it, and it did not meet my hopes, my expectations based on the first one, but totally felt like they intentionally had trashed it just because they realized that they needed to get a more woke in some fashion or another, even though that aspect wasn't blatant. But the deconstructing of the old characters, the old heroes, they literally brought Ivan Drago into the story to just sort of sweep him away and be like, all right, we had to deal with that, now we're done with that, and now we're going to go forward without all of these old men, and we're going to do something completely different. And good for them. Whatever they're going to do, I'm not going to watch, because it's not Rocky, it's not Creed, it's not a continuation of the franchise at all. They should have just plugged it into a whole other universe and had it be about somebody else. But trying to leech off of the fame and import of these earlier franchises, or bringing them in so they can intentionally deconstruct and destroy them in this communist critical theory way is just heartbreaking. It's discouraging, and it only produces crap. It doesn't produce quality movies, quality shows. And maybe that's the answer as to the other reason why they keep rebooting stuff, just so they can destroy it. Because the first being they want to destroy it, they want to undermine cultural heroes. The second being that they're probably just not talented enough. There's not enough talent or knowledge there to write anything brand new and have it be based on the storylines they're giving already established characters. I can only imagine that they couldn't draw a cartoon. They just couldn't draw a 2-panel Sunday Funny, which I shouldn't have said that either. That was a weird thing to pop into my head, because based on the nonsense coming out of Hollywood, that's actually degrading to most people that can make a good cartoon for a newspaper. Anyway, Creed 2, totally disappointing, totally the death of, clearly indicating the page is turned. They don't care about the franchise. They don't care about keeping the continuity with the Rockyverse, if that's a thing. Maybe I coined it. They don't care. They only care about trying to be seen as embracing the postmodern, deconstructed, whatever communist, Bolshevik, critical theory, reinterpretation, and how pathetic that you have to go back to something like Rocky and reinterpret and deconstruct boxing heroes from the realm of fiction from the 1980s, because that's all that you can be focused on, because your ideology is so ridiculously stupid and shallow. Anyway, I'll tell you how I truly feel one of these days. So this I wore because I missed Apollo Creed, and that's the last thing I got to plug. Apollo Creed's entry, that whole story in Rocky IV, where Apollo Creed was the one that wanted to stand up against the tyrants of communism. He said, we can't let them push us around. We got to stand up to them. Going out to the ring with the flag and the colors, and James Brown singing about America. For all the crybaby nonsense about how bad things were in the past in America, or how bad they are now. Watching that as a white farm kid in 1985, I'm not sure that it even occurred to me that those guys were black. It was a patriotic moment that was like, yeah. Even looking at it in hindsight, the fact that it's James Brown, I think, had I thought of it back then, my reaction would have been, you don't have James Brown in the Soviet Union, you commie bastards. There was so much there that was wonderful, beloved, engaging. We loved that scene. And despite all of the critical theory attempts to reinterpret that movie, that genre, that time, and to deconstruct it into this crap now, it was a better life. It was a better world. We did not look at it negatively. We were inspired by it. And man, Apollo Creed, if he were a real character, he would be ashamed that his son didn't use more of that sort of stuff, that theme, that imagery, those beliefs as part of his victory over this Russian in this movie. Anyway, that's the sermon for the evening. Thank you for being here. Peace and long life. Well, actually, that wasn't really science fiction, was it? Well, I can mix all genres. Thank you. Leave your comments below, and I'll be back with another review when I got something more to review.